Now we'll cover the second part of homeostasis, which is active transport. Active transport is the part where the cell's membrane actually has to use some sort of energy in order to get the molecules through the cell membrane or out of the cell membrane. There's pumps, and there's membrane movements. So the membrane can move and push organisms out or engulf organisms. So we've got endocytosis and exocytosis are types of membrane movements. All right, so active transport is the movement of membranes from an area of low concentration to high. Now remember, diffusion and osmosis are passive and they go from high concentration to low. Active transport is the opposite direction, from low concentration to high, and using a protein carrier, and the protein that actually requires energy in the form of ATP. Let me go back to that. ATP is adenosine triphosphate, and we're also going to cover that a little bit more, well, way more in-depthly when we go through photosynthesis. All right, so active transport is when the molecules are moving from an area where there aren't that many of them to an area where it's high concentration, which this is supposed to go down. All right, from an area of low concentration to high. So if you're running uphill, aren't you going to take a little bit more energy than if you're running downhill, which is the easy free fall? Yes. So that's how we can think of what needs to be added in order for active transport to take place, going from an area where there is nothing to an area where there is a lot. I also think of this as in the classroom situation where I told you there's a lot of us in a room filled to the brim. When that door opens and the bell rings, everyone comes spilling out. Now, what if they have that same room that's very full and someone else is trying to come in? They'd have to push and squeeze their way in. That's using a lot of energy actively. Okay, so ATP. It provides energy to the cell. There's a difference between ATP and ADP. ATP is adenosine triphosphate. Tri means 3. ADP is adenosine diphosphate, meaning 2. So ATP has 3 phosphate, ADP has 2 phosphate, and that is where the energy exists in the bonds between the phosphate group. Okay, the sodium-potassium pump, it's going to use that ATP that we just talked about in order to get sodium and potassium in and out of the cell through these pumps. And you can look here, and this is just a more simple version of the plasma membrane that, so in this area would exist the phospholipid bilayer, but we're really focusing on the proteins, okay? So in this one we've got the sodium that's going through, okay? And then we've got potassium that's coming out. And in the sodium-potassium pump, let's look at this, and maybe in class you can tell me kind of what's happening here on this diagram over here. Okay, active transport. So the active transport is the same situation where you've got molecules that need to come in, and it's that spin around or gates will open and let the molecule through, but that requires energy to open. Also, it's going to do the reverse and letting things out. Active transport of square molecules using the diffusion of a spearhead molecule as the source of energy. So some molecules can use the shape of another molecule in order to get in, and that's what this diagram is showing. Spearhead comes in, rectangle or square comes in, they bond, flip the protein around, and then the two can come out. Alright, so endocytosis is an overall engulfing or bringing molecules or particles into the cell using an extension of the cell membrane. Exocytosis is the same thing except it's reversed. So exit, it's a process of moving particles out of the cell. And basically that's what the Golgi apparatus does when it packages those proteins and sends it to the vesicle. The vesicle will move its way towards the membrane and be able to push those particles that aren't needed out of the cell membrane. And if you look here, you can see, so you've got endocytosis, a collection of particles. The membrane is concave and it actually will engulf these particles and create a little vesicle. Exocytosis, same thing. It's a vesicle and it's heading out. Eventually it'll hit the outside of the cell membrane, open up, and release any excess or unwanted particles. Now, phagocytosis is where the membrane folds and it allows the cell to bring food into the cell. Phage is eat, cytosis is of the cell. And phagocytes actually exist more so in like a bacterial cell or in our immune system cells. Pinocytosis, the process where the membrane folding and it lets the cell bring water into the cell. A large amount of water can be brought into the cell through pinocytosis.